So a question came in about Dillon Gabriel, of which I have many thoughts. This one came from Aaron. Question: if you were to make a comparison, would you say Dillon Gabriel is more like Vernon Adams Jr. or Jeremiah Masoli? And part two, how would you rank the three? So when Gabriel first transferred to Oregon, I'd watched him play a good amount at Oklahoma, and I watched more of his film and highlights and whatnot. And my first take, gut instinct, was a Masoli type. Not in that he's going to run over a safety who's 200 pounds the way Masoli did against Oklahoma State and against Oregon State, of course, in the Civil War in 2009. But just stylistically, smaller guy, good arm, accurate, moves well, will take off and run. And certainly Gabriel does take off and run. So that's kind of where my head went to. Then last week, I had Ryan Winter on the show, who is a fantastic guest. And when we had this conversation, he brought up the Vernon Adams comparison because he said, Gabriel will take off and he'll move out of the pocket, but he moves to throw more. And I think I like that comp a lot better, or I thought that I liked that comp a lot better. I thought about it for a while, and I think he's right. And certainly there are similarities between those guys because they will take off and run. But Vernon Adams, I loved Vernon Adams. I was a huge Vernon Adams fan. Hill, I will die on from now until the end of time. If Vernon Adams doesn't get hurt against Eastern Washington, that Oregon team makes the playoff. That roster was still really good. DeForest Buckner was the defensive player of the year in the Pac-12. They went 9-3, and they would have gone 11-1 because they lost to Washington State and Utah because Vernon Adams wasn't able to play. And they would not that would not have been the case. The offenses were severely limited, and they didn't have a good backup quarterback situation. So I've always been a big Vernon Adams fan. And Vernon Adams, like Gabriel, not the biggest guy, mobile. I think Gabriel runs a little bit more. Vernon Adams wasn't really someone who had designed quarterback runs as a part of the game plans. Like, he kept it on the read option every now and then of course, got hurt doing so in the Alamo Bowl against TCU. But it's not as much a feature of his game as it is for Dillon Gabriel. So in that sense, I think he can be a tad more dynamic with what Will Stein is able to do offensively with the play calls. But I liked what Ryan said a lot about he moves to throw, which is a Russell Wilson sort of quality from when Russell Wilson was actually good, not whatever became of him when he got to Denver. And when you watch Gabriel, he's got a great deep ball. He's tremendously accurate. I think he and Evan Stewart, just like in the spring game, are going to link up for some big shots this year. Because when he gets outside the pocket, he does an exceptional job of throwing the ball downfield with accuracy. And, you see a guy that completes almost 70% of his passes last year. I expect him to hit 70% this year with the Ducks. I mean, Bo Nix set the NCAA record last year. It was at 77.5%. It was going, back and forth between, he's under, he's over in the Fiesta Bowl against Liberty. But I don't expect Gabriel to be at 77%. But should he be in the 71, 72 range? Yeah, last 2 years, Oregon quarterbacks have been over 70%, which have been records. And yeah, Bo Nix was exceptional. I think that Gabriel's ability to move and throw on the move with the weapons that he's got gives him the opportunity to continue to excel with those skill sets as he has. Because you see a high completion percentage like Bo Nix, and people think, he's just dinking and dunking all the time. Gabriel pushes the ball down the field. He's got the arm to do it. He's got the accuracy. And he's got the mobility to keep plays alive and get a completion where some guys might have to just throw the ball away. He's also, and I think Ryan pointed this out, he's a little bit stronger than people realize. Like, he can be a tougher guy to tackle than you would think. He's got that LaMichael James quality where he's shorter, but he's got the low center of gravity, and guys can be hard to bring down that are able to maximize that trait. So, yeah, I like the Vernon Adams Jr. How would I rank all three? Oh, gosh. I haven't seen... I have an idea of what Dillon Gabriel will be in this Oregon offense. And statistically... Let me pull up Vernon Adams' stats real quick. Statistically, Gabriel's probably going to wind up with the best numbers. Vernon Adams was 65% completion... and he threw for about 264 yards a game in the 10 games that he played, 26 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. Gabriel will probably wind up with the best numbers. I mean, he threw 6 interceptions in 12 games last year. I bet you he's around that number in 12, 13 games or 14, however many Oregon plays this year, this season. Like, let's just, project over the course of a 12-game year. Last year, Gabriel was 3,600 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, and he ran for 12 touchdowns. With the weapons he's got this year and the offensive line he had a really good offensive line last year at Oklahoma. I'd say he's probably around 4,000 yards passing, mid-30s, probably for touchdowns passing. I bet his rushing touchdowns come down. It's probably under 10 just because Oregon, the last couple of years, quarterbacks running for touchdown or Bo Nix running for touchdowns has been on the quarterback sneak. So I think a lot more of those goal line carries might go to running backs for Will Stein and company. But certainly I hope they utilize Dillon Gabriel's legs because it's a real asset to him. Even though I really liked Masoli as well, I definitely put Masoli third. I'd probably, man. Like, I'll go with Gabriel first. I'll go with Gabriel first and Vernon Adams second. I think the gap between those two is closer than the gap between Vernon Adams and Masoli. Like, VA was, there was a whole thing with a late arrival of Vernon Adams and a math test to get eligible. I don't even remember all the details of it. But Vernon Adams, to this day, throws the best deep ball of any Oregon quarterback I have seen. And I forget the coach that gave the quote. It might have been Scott Frost. I could have that wrong in my memory bank, but there was a coach that said Vernon Adams throws the most accurate deep ball he's ever seen from an Oregon quarterback, and I fully agree with that. I mean, it was Michael Penix's level of accuracy pushing the ball down the field. And Gabriel, I think, has a similar sort of touch, but VA was really, really good. So I'll go Gabriel first. I also think Gabriel has a slightly more lively arm than Vernon Adams did and a little bit of a cleaner motion. And he also has a little bit more running to his game as a feature of what he brings to the quarterback position than Vernon Adams. But I love Vernon Adams. I was a big fan. But yeah, good question there. Last one here. Speaking of quarterback talk, this from Ben. So my mailbag question. I see the updated player rankings came out on 24/7. A lot of them made sense. However, I did have a question about Achilles Smith Jr. He's ranked, I believe, 113th before the latest update and dropped all the way to 247th. Why would there be such a big drop in the offseason, preseason rankings? Is he going to need more development time than what Oregon thought? Would this mean Oregon really needs to find a second quarterback in the 2025 class? Thanks as always, go Ducks, Ben. So no, Oregon does not need another quarterback in 2025. There was a moment where it looked like they might be interested in Ty Hawkins, and I think that moment has faded. And I think there's good reason for that Oregon has plenty of quarterbacks going forward, as I've discussed many times before here on the show. I think that the drop is not something to worry about. And one thing I've noticed, a couple things. First of all, this is not, some conspiracy against Oregon recruits. Oregon is not the only school that has had recruits fall in the rankings. Oregon's also had recruits rise in the rankings. There are a lot of reasons as to why. One thing that I've noticed is guys that have been committed for a long time don't get the same consistent level of attention they had before they were committed, and that can lead to a drop in the rankings. But it might not be that Achilles Smith Jr. did anything wrong, because he was at these Elite 11 camps all over the place, and by all reports, he was doing really well. And I think what can happen is guys who are not committed or who are not as locked into their commitment might get more attention from the scouting community and then rise up the ranks a little bit more. But I would not worry in the slightest, because Mateo Uiagalelei, for instance, and Aiden Breland is the latest example of this. They were 5-star recruits when Oregon got them verbally committed. By the time they signed, they'd lost a star in their 24/7 Sports composite ranking. They're the same guy. Like, it happens a lot in the NFL draft. You overthink the room. You go too in-depth on, thinking about this or thinking about that. There are a lot of factors that go into a particular recruitment and where a guy is ranked and why he's ranked there and who ranked him there and how much input that they're getting. There are a lot of factors. So unless a guy is really cratering, and I don't think that applies to Achilles Smith Jr., I don't think it's anything to worry about. And the guy's still the same player. And he's still 6'3", 6'4", with a good arm and a clean motion, and of course a fantastic line of genetics to come from. But I think when Oregon fans see these sorts of things, it's easy to translate what happens in the NFL draft, which is a lot of times Oregon players get overlooked, like Justin Herbert, or the narrative around Kayvon Thibodeau or Penei Sewell wasn't this, that, and the other thing. And all of us Oregon fans were just sitting there going, yeah, this is all ridiculous. These guys are all studs. Lo and behold, they are all fantastic football players. So I don't think it's going to affect Oregon's recruiting in the quarterback position. I don't think that they need to add a quarterback. I don't think it affects his development or timeline or anything. He's still a really talented kid. He's going to have a bunch of weapons to throw the ball to and a great coaching staff by the time he gets to Oregon next year. So I think Oregon's all good. Keep the questions coming. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, or if you want priority access, go join the flock over at Subtext. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.